All right. Okay. This is awesome. Um, it looks like we already have a bunch of people attending here, and people are filing in. So, hey, welcome to our online coaching session around how to survive then thrive working from home. My name is Patrick Evers of Mind Maven, and we have Melinda here too. Do you want to say a few words?
Yeah.
Hi to everyone.
Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to be here with all of you this morning, sharing Almanac's mission to share knowledge. We had the pleasure of meeting Patrick a few weeks ago when we kicked off the COVID-19 and remote work playbooks. He's been an essential contributor and shared his webinar with us last week, and it was just so wonderful. We wanted to share it with all of you. So big thank you, Patrick, for sharing your insights with us.
Totally. And for those that came from our following, so we're trying something new. We're really excited. We partnered up with Almanac. We'll talk a bit more about what that is, but they are hands down the best content we were able to find on how to work from home. And so we figured, hey, we need to help people find more about this. And in fact, many of you guys might already know what Almanac is. It's a platform in which you can find in-depth, high-value best practice guides on how to do right about anything, really. And so what they haven't done historically, you know, it's mostly written text type of guides that are very, very valuable and very detailed, but never brought the content into live action like this today. And so we do have a question for everybody who's here. Do you guys think that Almanac should do that more often, augment their sessions? Is the poll coming up?
Poll should be live.
All right, because for some reason I don't see it. Can you see it, Melinda?
No, I don't. But agreed. This is
those on the chat. Those that are already in the room. Can you guys see if you get the poll? Type us a quick tip. Nope. So Connor, can you please switch it on?
Interesting. It says that it is now live and we are polling audience members.
Okay, no poll, nope, not able to see.
Let me try ending the poll and I'm going to drop it in again.
That's all right. So you guys, maybe Derek can hop on in and help out with this. It probably is a technical glitch, but the question we're going to ask you is, hey, should we do more of that? So as soon as it comes up, we're going to pop the poll and ask you guys. I'm sorry that you guys don't have it. In the meantime,
we do have some votes coming in. So the poll should be up. We have one person who has voted at least.
All right. So guys, if you see the poll, that'll be awesome. And so forth. Okay, somebody's asking how we can access last week's training. Can you send the link? We're happy to do that to you afterwards. We got your name, Cedric. We'll jump in on that in a second. So a little bit of housekeeping before we get going. So the chat section that you already found is a great place for you guys to ask questions. Please ask them because we will have a few minutes at the end to respond to them. And I also sometimes will ask you guys to raise your hand. If you do, you can see that in the bottom line of the Zoom area. And yes, it is 3 minutes after 10. I think we have most people that we wanted to have here show up. And with that, I'd say, Melinda, do you think we should get going?
Yeah, let's get going.
All right. So I'm going to let you start it off, and I will advance the slides.
Okay. Yeah, so we've been working with all of our contributors to get the best insights on working remote. We've heard from people working at Glassdoor, Zapier, Slack, GitHub, AngelList, and of course, Patrick at Mind Maven, who's been just essential to helping us pull together this information. So it's all on Almanac. I'll make sure that all of you get this afterwards in the written form.
All right, fantastic. Yes. And I looked through it, by the way, and it was really amazing. If you, some of you guys have maybe been there in the last week's session, it is almost 100% overlap in terms of what they suggested in the guide and what I basically speak about. So a lot of the things that if they resonate today, you'll find a lot more in-depth information and practical tips on how to do it. And the other thing that really is important is yes, this guide is not just things that Melinda thought is important, but basically she drew it from some of the most amazing contributors of the internet. There are people at Glassdoor, there are people from GitLab, you know, and Zapier, Slack that have contributed to basically by giving their experiences to this guide. And so I think it's a really powerful thing. But with that, I'm going to jump in and talk a little bit about me and Mind Maven, and then get going with how we can basically survive and then thrive working from home. So Mind Maven is a coaching organization. We do executive coaching, and we help leaders basically achieve the top limits of their abilities, help them pursue their vision. And we do that, though, in a very unique way by focusing on one thing and one thing only, and that is relationships. And the reason we believe in relationships so much is because we think that nobody has ever reached the top of their fullest potential without help from others. And it's a concept that people don't leverage enough, don't use enough. And as you can see, we work with some very impressive people in our community. And what we've learned from them is that they kept on telling us, like, hey, you unleashed superpowers for us. And so we said, okay, I guess that's what we're in. We're helping people get superpowers, specifically leaders. And the superpowers are three levels. One is leverage. It's basically a unique way that we develop on how you can delegate better to an EA or chief of staff type of person, freeing up to 8 to 10 hours of time. We then basically say, if we freed up all of that time, how can we make sure you become a lot more intentful in your time allocation so that you focus on those projects that move the needle most? Because we all know the most successful people we know are people that are and stay proactive. And then finally, and this is our favorite superpower, is fellowship, because at the end of the day, every CEO's job is to manage relationships in the form of getting people to join their vision and then stick around and follow them, preferably through hell and back. And so you guys might ask, like, okay, why is Patrick here and why is he so good at giving a talk now about working from home? Well, the answer is actually surprisingly easy. One is that over a decade, we've run Mind Maven as a 100% remote organization, and we've learned a lot of lessons, especially a lot of things you shouldn't do. And we ended up teaching quite a few people. And then the second thing is even more obvious, and that is that our bread and butter is about teaching people how to manage relationships, how to stay connected. And in these times that we're in right now, that is about one of the most important skills around and really worthwhile investing into. And so let's start talking about working from home and what the biggest challenge is. And to me, the biggest challenge is a very simple one. We need to make sure we stay happy. It's very easy to end up not feeling very happy when working from home. And so you need to be aware of what the top two success drivers are. And the two most important success drivers is that you stay productive, that you feel productive, and that you feel connected with those people that matter most. And so why do I think that's so important? Well, let's go into it a little bit and see how it plays out. Right? Like let's take the example of not feeling productive. There's a very high chance that after a while, once the honeymoon phase goes over and we're not giddy about working from home anymore, in fact, the ceiling falls down on our head and we're like, oh my God. And I think I wouldn't be surprised, but what in 2 weeks into it, I think, Melinda, right? And so people are probably now feeling how hard this actually is. And so one of the things that happened is that we get easier distracted when we work from home, and what that results in is that we work longer hours. And so what used to be an 8 to 9 hour day might end up being a 10 to 12, even 14 hour day. And that makes us feel very unhappy, very resentful towards the work. Even though if I were to basically sit next to you with a stopwatch and time you, it might actually be that you really only have worked 8 to 9 hours that day. It just felt a lot more. That results in some form of unhappiness. You feel like you need to work more because you're not as productive. guilt comes up. It's all of these like really unpleasant feelings that actually are counterproductive for you being successful in working from home. So we got to find the skills to counter that. We'll talk about that today. The second thing is feeling connected, and that thing is even more important. If you come out of a physical first environment where you went to an office every day, you had these ad hoc interactions every day, you felt connected by working in a office. That's all gone now. Well, the good news is it doesn't have to change that much. You just have to become a lot more proactive in doing that. So we'll talk about that too. Why? Well, if we are feeling disconnected, it can lead to a sense of isolation, and that leads to, on the better end of things, to a mild case of feeling lonely, but it can go all the way to some pretty severe cases of depression. And so it's very, very important for us to stay away from that. The problem is it's really easy to fail at both. And ultimately that pressure, that increased pressure of having to be productive and the sense of isolation will lead to unhappiness. And so let's start with talking about how we can stay connected, because I think that is a huge leverage point for us. So starting with this, the first question we have to ask ourselves is like, well, we feel connected because we have relationships. So let's understand the power of relationships and what they influence most about that, why they are so important for us. And there's a very long running study done by Harvard over 75 years that had only one purpose, and that is to discover the key of long-term happiness and fulfillment. And the result will probably not surprise any of you guys today. It is that the most important part is relationships, because they keep us happy and healthier, period. That is the single clear answer we got from that. And we can put it into other words to make it even more clear. And that is that the quality of our life is directly proportional to the quality of our relationships. And when I'm talking about life, I'm talking about everything, right? I'm talking about the emotional, the physical, and the mental aspects of our life. Relationships make us happy. And here's the problem with this. The problem is that we're also have a really weird reaction. It's kind of counterintuitive, but that's what a lot of us do. And that is that we, when we are hurt, when we are feeling attacked, when we are feeling threatened, or even just embarrassed, one of the things that we naturally do is we retreat into our cave, right, into our shell, and very often sever very important social connections that we have. And what's going on right now is that we're doing that on a national level. And that to me is a very, very, very dangerous state. And many, and what we have as a duty, I think, is we have to combat that aspect as well. And it's not just about happiness or unhappiness. It is also about performance, about being productive. Harvard also did a study where they looked at two different groups of students, those that are the overachiever, wanting to study all the time, no personal life and nothing. And then those that studied well, no doubt, but also had a significant component of social connections. Well, guess what? Those that had the social connections ended up consistently outperforming those that just studied. So being connected is important, not just for your happiness and for your sanity. It's also important for you to do a good job while working from home. And so for me, my biggest worry in these times is that we're basically entering an epidemic of isolation. I think the damage that this can do can be bigger than what we're actually having with the actual virus. Now, don't get me wrong. I believe everybody needs to stay home and everybody needs to practice this concept of social distancing, which has all of these things here that we need to do. But while this advice is really important and right, a lot of people aren't practicing social distancing. What they're practicing is distancing, right? And really the key thing about social distancing is that social distancing is a skill where you are distancing yourself physically, but you're becoming way more social than you usually would be. And so I'm here today to talk to you about how we can achieve that, right? And I'm going to start with talking about connections that that start in the world of meetings, in the world of business. So, and to do that well, we need to ask ourselves and understand, how do we actually communicate, we humans, right? And the answer is actually really simple. It's been figured out by a professor of psychology at UCLA called Albert Merbein. And what he discovered is that there are 3 channels and how we basically communicate. Number 1 is the content of what we're saying, the words we're choosing, right? Number 2 is the tone of our voice and how we're delivering that. And then thirdly, all of the visual signals we're sending, particularly our body language with a big focus on facial expressions, all right? So what he did that is really important to understand is that he tried to evaluate how much does each of them count when we're perceiving it, how heavy, what's the relative importance of it. And what he found out is astonishing. Maybe not 100% surprising, but a lot of people are surprised at the ratios, right? So when you are talking to me, basically, and I perceive you in an in-person experience, what I will give the most weight to is visual, 55%. The tone is 38%, and only 7% is the choice of your words, the content you're choosing. And this is why time and time again, we like meeting in persons. That's why meetings will never disappear, right? We've all been in that situation where you and I might have sent an email that you thought was really innocent. Like honestly, generally, you thought it was innocent. You get this flare mail back of somebody being really upset about you, right? If I could see you right now, I bet a lot of you guys today would be nodding your head, right? And so, that's because we only use 7%, and that means the person who's receiving it filled out the remaining 93%. So in-person meetings will never go away, and that leads me to my very first tip, and that is we need to make sure that you communicate always with the video on. Make it your default, make it a rule. All meetings should be video meetings, and the video should be on. It's the way to go. Why? The answer is very simple, because if you're doing video, you're emulating the in-person experience very closely, and you're basically signaling via words, with a tone, and with your body, specifically facial expressions. A side benefit is people can't mess around with doing multitasking, because multitasking is a myth. It does not exist. The only thing you are doing when you're thinking you're good at multitasking is rapid switching. All right. So, let's talk about another tip around how to create great in-person experiences. And this is really how you set yourself up for video conferencing. Most of you guys have the video, the camera right above the screen. And so what happens is, if you look at that person, you look like I'm looking at you guys now. I'm looking sort of at the, chest area down below, and I'm actually not connecting. But if I raise my eyes and I look into the camera like I'm doing right now, I bet that you feel like I'm talking to you a lot more. So it's a little weird thing, but it's important, because you will make people feel a lot more connected with you. So specifically when you're talking, do it this way. You can see here how my setup right now in this office is. I have my camera in front of on a tripod in front of the image of the person that I'm talking to, so I can look slightly past it and see the person's facial reactions as well while I'm looking into the camera. And that's very powerful. The last tip that I have is, you can probably hear it right now, my voice is getting a lot better, is get the microphone, and get a good microphone very close to you in some way or other. It makes for a huge difference. And the audio aspects of how pleasant the experience is very often underestimated. Invest into a microphone in some way or other, or at least go on a call with a buddy of yours and do a little test, which sounds less haughty, less metallic, which sounds most pleasant. And so that's basically the most important aspects about the in-person experience. Now let's talk about some of the things you can do at work to basically recreate the water cooler chat. And I have 5 suggestions for you that I'm going to run us through to. Number 1 is just make them happen. Make them socially acceptable to have these scheduled 10-minute calls where you ring up somebody who's like, hey, do you mind having a water cooler conversation? If now doesn't work, what about at 3 o'clock in the afternoon? Have a green room experience. The green room idea is that you move all the meetings that you have for 60 minutes to a 50-minute rhythm, and they start at noon, the meetings, but the first 5 minutes you actually use for social interactions. And then have 50 minutes of a meeting. Then you have even still 5 more minutes afterwards to clean up some of the social conversations that weren't finished in the first 5 minutes. Eliminate small talk. Yes, that's counterintuitive, because I just said, like, look, do some banter in front of the meetings that you have. Well, What I mean with that is don't talk about how the weather was or something. Talk about more meaningful things. Ask deeper, more meaningful questions, and they often result in very connecting experience. And that's exactly what we're looking for, what we need right now. Work from home, happy hours. I'm sure many of you guys have tried them out. They're great. They're like weekly sessions where people can drop in and chat. Find virtual versions to wind down from work in some way or other with co-workers and other people. And then finally, try this thing on where you have a virtual room, a virtual break room. It could be a Zoom room that is a link where people can go into anytime they are taking a break, and sometimes you'll find somebody else in there and you can have a little bit of a chat and so on and so forth. Initially, it might be socially awkward, but what will happen eventually is that people will find find that they are going into the rooms roughly at the same times, and it makes you guys feel a lot more connected. So having talked about the business side of things, let's broaden it up and include into the business side of things also our personal lives by saying, how do we put the social back into social distancing, right? And the first answer to that is very simple. All we have to do is interact more with people. There's absolutely no reason you need to feel disconnected or more disconnected just because you're working from home. The only difference is in the past when you worked in an office, it was a lot more ad hoc and you didn't have to do it. The connections happened for you. So now there's no reason that those connections don't have to happen anymore just because you're working from home. The only thing you have to do is become a lot more proactive. And how to make that happen is what I'm going to talk about now. And one of the first things is basically ensure that the quality of the interactions you're staging is at the right level. Try to communicate as much as possible at the highest bandwidth you can. So do video calls, right? Or even send Loom-based video messages that are 10, 15 seconds long. It's great. It's easy. You can do it. If you can't do video calls for some reason, do phone calls so you're at least delivering your tone. If you can't do that, emails and text messages are great too, because the rule is very simple. I want you to, every interaction is better than none at all, because all of them have the potential of making you feel a lot more connected. But the most important thing is really make it happen, right? Just reach out to people. Good. So I said reach out to people. So we have to ask ourselves, who do we reach out to? And the answer is obviously the recency bias that you will bring to the table for this quest is going to lead you to your strong ties. And that's a good thing. I'm talking about your family, your close friends, the extended family. I'm talking about mentors, either on the spiritual side, the business side, whatever side it is, people that you admire. And of course, people you work with that you see very often and with whom you've built a relationship. And that is a good thing. The reason it's good is because we already have really good, meaningful relationships with these people. And so every small interactions will fire up the memory of that and therefore make you feel profoundly more connected. So it's a very group of people to do it, but it's also what we would do naturally. And that's why I'm saying, don't stop there. Move on and also reach out to people you might have not talked to in the last 6 months, maybe a year, maybe years, maybe many years. We call them the weak ties, and you've known this probably for a long time if you've been around, is that there are numerous studies that talk about the weak ties being those people that have the most to offer. And so I'm talking about college buddies, old roommates, and even prior coworkers. Reach out to them. So let's talk about one group of people that is probably very immediate and in your face, and that is basically your family time. Many of the family members you have are probably still in your physical proximity, specifically your kids, right? And so one of the real benefits from working from home is that your water cooler conversations can be with your kids. So don't be mad at that. Be excited. It's a unique time where that is socially acceptable for you to have, and it's a gift. Enjoy them. So make the best out of them by being very present in the moment when you're interacting with the kids, and make those experiences for the kids more meaningful, but also for you. I want to talk later about modes, because that is where you have to be in the right mode to do this really well. Plan activities that you can do in-house. There are so many interesting ideas you can do. It's very easy. And then finally, also don't overdo it. You're physically cooped in together. I don't know how big your home is, but there are several ways in which you have to extract yourself when you feel like you don't have the bandwidth to deal with this, especially if your emotional stability feels a little weak today. You know, find your mechanism of, I need to go into this room and be alone, do some workout, or do some mindfulness practice. All of those things help. But to be honest, don't take it from me. This is one of the ways where I thought I was really impressed by the work that Almanac put together with putting together the survival guide. And one of my favorite pieces of content was this work by Nicole here around how to work from home with kids. Great, really nice details, and a lot of small little pragmatic tips that you could use. And so we're going to be sending out an email afterwards with the links to the guide, but also links to these items. Or you'll find it in the guide. So the next question we have to ask ourselves is staying social. And that's why I'm extending. Everything so far was about the one-on-one connections, so one-on-one interactions. Very powerful because very connecting. But one of the things we like doing is doing in groups, and groups feel harder to do virtually, but it is easier than you think, as you will see. And there's a spectrum of things you can do in groups online, from the coffee talk that starts, that is very ad hoc, very casual, is non-recurring, and you invite different peoples. At times you just basically say, hey, in 45 minutes, let's get coffee together. You're in? Sure, let's do it. And a few people that you know get together who can joins. On the other end of that, you can basically really get into what I call recreational education, is learning something. One of the best ways in which we can basically make ourselves feel a lot happier and fulfilled is by continuing to grow. We grow through learning. So use some of the time we freed up by working from home in terms of not having to commute to learn new things by having virtual mastermind meetings. These are regular scheduled meetings with the same small group of people, where you pick a specific topic. And this is, of course, where I can now very, very, very profoundly talk a little bit about how Almanac works and what Almanac does, because it's literally the workspace for your team's knowledge. When I came into contact with it, I thought, I mean, this is really amazing. And I looked around, you have all of these different articles here and guides here. And one of my absolute favorite ones, because it's pretty close to some of the coaching we do, is how to basically do one-on-one meetings better. So if any of you guys that are joined us today here are leaders of a team, now is a great time to invest into improving the way you do your one-on-one meetings. Not only in terms of efficiency, but also in the way you connect with people. And this is great. This is really awesome stuff. So I was really blown away by the work Melinda and her team pulled together, getting 75 different top leaders to talk about it. But I want to ask you a question, Melinda, real quick. That was my favorite one. Do you have your absolute favorite one yourself?
Yeah, one of my other favorite ones would be our guide for hiring. We talk to people who are experts in hiring for all major roles that you would find in your company, and it kind of takes the initial work out of it, job descriptions, interview questions from multiple perspectives, no matter what the position is. So that one's been super helpful too.
Oh my God, yes. And Melinda, if I'm honest, like one of the biggest jobs that a CEO or founder of a startup has, and any kind of leader, is hiring, right? It's the superpower of fellowship. And one of the things we talk about in our work is how can you develop a meaningful relationships through the interview process. So
many good tips on how to do that. Be happy to share more.
Yes, exactly. Okay, so check it out. If you haven't, if you're not a user already, go and sign up, and you'll find a lot of really good things. In the meantime, I also want you guys to get super creative, right? So we talked about this group thing that you can do, and there's so many interesting ways in which you can do it. Like if you liked going out with your coworkers for drinks after work, you still can do that online with these happy hours. But if you like reading books and you used to do book clubs, there's no reason not to continue to do it or pick that up right now again. For those that love, and I'm one of them who loves playing games, board games, for example, many games are available online in terms of social gaming. And I'm not talking about like multiplayer video games. I'm talking about board games that are now online. I don't know if you know the Settlers of Catan, but that's a big one that I love playing, and it's fully available online. You can basically play it with whoever you want to, wherever they might be. A very connecting way to get together. And then of course, binge watching some shows together is always great. You can create a group chat and shoot the shit. And then afterwards get together on an actual video call to have a nice what the fuck session when you're talking about what just happened at that red wedding. So it's really easy. Get creative and don't just try to recreate the virtual, the real physical world in the virtual world. See what works really well in the virtual world and embrace that. So that's the tips that I had for you in terms of things you can do to stay connected. And it sounded probably all very simple, but why does it feel for so many of us so hard? Well, the reason is that there are 3 barriers, and these barriers we have to find ways to overcome. So number 1 is who to reach out to. My best tip there is very simply, we think about people all the time, but then we don't write them down. So as you think about somebody you haven't talked to in a while, write the name down on a Notion notebook or on an Evernote note, or even on a spreadsheet, whatever floats your boat, and start adding them. Keep it open, that file, and add them there. Without a doubt, within 48 hours, you'll have 50 names there, 15 that you can start reaching out to whenever you have time. And that is the next question. The next barrier we have to overcome is that despite the fact that we're working from home, we're still probably driven by this one challenge of urgency versus importance. And here's a very important thing. Relationships are important, no doubt. We learned that already, but they're almost never urgent. And so what we need to learn is overcome the importance versus urgency challenge. And the best advice I have is twofold. Number 1, take some of the time you gained from not having to commute and use that time proactively for staying healthy in a connected way by reaching out. Schedule 15 to half an hour a day to reach out to people. That's part of your new job description, in my view. Right? So make that important, and make that basically a thing that happens. If you want to do it more as a habitual thing and reach out 1 time a day to people habitually without having to put it on your calendar, the best advice I have for you there is to utilize what is called an action trigger. An action trigger is an existing habit that you already have, and you piggyback a new one you want to learn on it. So you can establish the new one as its own habit in its own right. The way it works, an example is coffee. Almost most of us get coffee in the morning at one point or the other, and we don't put that into our calendar saying get coffee, right? So it happens, it's a habit. So before you allow yourself to get the habit, the coffee, you realize you want to get coffee. That reminds you of, like, I want to do one outreach to somebody that I would have not reached out today. You do it right then and there, and then you reward yourself with coffee. If you do that for 21 days or longer, there's a very good chance that this establishes itself as a habit. Which leads me to the third barrier that you might have, and that is a resistance to reach out because you don't quite know what to send, or it would feel awkward. And so there I have a bunch of tips. And one of the tips, and the tips that we have is we call them our freebies. There are 5 freebies that we have. I'm only going to talk about this one, but the thing about freebies is that you can basically send them to anyone. I would almost guarantee you could give me a name of anybody you hadn't talked to in a while with whom you have a decent relationship, and you and I will find at least one of the freebies will apply to the person. So they come for free. You can reach out to anyone utilizing that. One of the freebies is saying thank you, and it's easy to do. It's one of the most fulfilling experiences, not only for yourself, but for the person that reaches out to you. There's a study around gratitude visits, and they found out that gratitude visit had a long-lasting effect on staying happy. So when I say thank you, don't always default to the huge things that people have done for you, but do smaller things. Thank you for walking my dog, or thank you for taking care of my pet for 2 weeks 3 years ago, right? Like if you thought, if you think back, you'll find things you are thankful about that relationship, and then just write them down. It's that easy. And now I want to finish off with giving you guys my most powerful habit in all of Mind Mavens coaching, and that is positive alacrity. Positive alacrity is so simple. Because of its simplicity, it is very powerful because the impact cannot be understated. So when you think something positive and you genuinely believe that, voice it right then and there. Make that a habit, because what we have 3 to 4 really positive thoughts every day in our head. I bet if I could see you guys, raise your hand, by the way, if you feel that's true. Do you think something positive? When I talk about positive thoughts, I'm talking about small things like that's intriguing, or that's a new thought, a new way of doing it. Those glasses look good on this person, or, they fit, or stuff like that. We think that all the time, but we keep them to ourselves. All I'm asking you guys to do is voice it, because by voicing it, it's almost guaranteed you're going to spend 3 seconds, and in these 3 seconds, you're going to make somebody else's day. And we're interacting enough with people, so whenever you notice that, do that, you're going to actually really make a lot of people around you happier, and in turn, they're going to respond to you in a way that feels very good for you. So it's not just for them, you're going to get a lot out of it as well. Okay, yeah, we're seeing a lot of hand raises of people here. That's awesome to see. Good, guys, I'm going to move on to talking about some of the more hardcore working from home skills that we want to have, and jump into talking about how to stay productive. And the first thing I'm going to get into is talking about your setup. It's kind of a boring topic, but here's why this is so important. You are working from home now. Home is the place where you socialize, where you relax, where you recuperate, where you do the things that you enjoy doing. And you're supposed to do that there because that allows you to be very good at work. Well, what that means, it's full of triggers all around you, triggers that make those behaviors get activated, often subconsciously. And so working from home, in terms of being productive, your odds are absolutely against you. And so what we have to do is figure out how you can set up your workspace in such a way that you can still win. And I have 3 tips here. And what we will do is we will send an email with the slides to everyone. And those slides have 35 more slides that are hidden. You can see that I have 3 tips here, and we have an expanded version of that will talk a little bit more about it, but I'll walk you guys quickly through this. Set up a dedicated workspace, super important. Why? Because you need a bubble that is for your work world, right? And then make sure that it's set up healthy. Do not try to just work on your couch with your laptop, because you're going to end up feeling unhealthy relatively fast, because you're going to be working like this a lot. And then people that have sensitive wrists might end up with carpal tunnel. So set yourself up, preferably a standing or sitting desk if you have that. If you don't have that, maybe you can get a riser. If you can get a riser, use books and put a secondary screen onto the books. If you have one of those. If you don't have that, put the laptop on those books so that you end up looking straight at your screen, right? A laptop stand on books is great because it even rises the screen even higher. And then use, of course, a external keyboard, and preferably what I call a vertical mouse, because it lets your wrist be in a much more natural state. Then lastly, but just as important, be aware of the lighting that you have around you, right? Like try to simulate sunlight with 6,400 Kelvin lights. This is my setup here. One thing that you see is that I have 2 lights. One is the light one, and then the other one is a bit more of a yellow one when I'm in a thinking kind of mood and I want to not have it so bright. But the bright lights are good to be clear in your mind, awake and alert. Something that we have to try to figure out when working from home. And again, great stuff to be found on the survival guide. This is Darren here from GitLab on a really nice write-up on how to set yourself up from home. Goes way more into detail than I could have in terms of like, chairs that work out well and what do they buy in terms of tools and so forth. Really good stuff. Good. Now I'm going to go into finding your rhythm, and I cannot stress this more. finding a rhythm is really important. I'm going to talk about three things. Number one, to learn to understand what your different modes are when you're working from home. Number two is become consciously able to identify when you're transitioning from one mode to the other, and how to structure your day in such a way that that it allows you to stay productive over longer periods of time working from home. And so let's start with understanding what I mean with modes, right? Modes are absolutely key to your productivity at home. And the reason being is you were forced to invite your work world into your home, right? And not only for a day where it's kind of fun, or 2 days, or maybe, you know, a short period of time, but like for the foreseeable future, we are going to work from home. So we have to learn how to deal with that. And when you do that, because you're inviting a whole new me into your home world, you have two modes. One is the work me mode, and the other one is the home me mode. And most people are sort of kind of aware of it, but you don't productize it. You don't like be aware of when I'm in what. And that is very, very important. Why? Because the problem is that we are constantly switching between those modes. It's really easy to switch between one mode or the other. And the more we switch, the less efficient we are. And so one of the keys to being successful in working from home is to be aware in which mode I'm in. And so let's talk about that one. The key thing to becoming aware is to know when you're transitioning, because the transition will alert you to you're moving from the I'm in the work me mode to the home me mode. And so the best thing that you can do to be aware of these transition is just get good at your own awareness of what is currently happening with you right now. Be present in your moment. And when you do that, what you will notice almost inevitably is that you're switching a lot. You're switching from work me to home me, from home me to work me. And each switch basically comes as a cost. There's a switching cost to it, and that basically is profoundly reducing your productivity. So how do you basically become better aware? Well, one of the things you can do is just look at what happens around a transition, right? So for example, a good tip is when you get up and move, the physical movement is a good sign you might be slipping from work me to home me, right? And so be aware, movement, am I staying to my my mode of working me or not? Impulses, those are feelings that you have. For example, the procrastination emotion that rises in us is like we don't want to do something, you know, and that very often will push us into another mode, into the home mode, because we're going to say, you know what, before I get working on this particular piece, I'm going to go do the dishes at home. So become really aware of it, because the moment you have awareness around you transitioning, you get to make a choice. You get control back instead of it being an automatism that runs, right? And you need to be aware that that's really big, because you have all these triggers around you triggering you to go into home me mode. All right, the next tip that I have for you is use the portal technique. That's a pretty hands-on, simple thing. Is come up with a point, a physical point where you are entering the work me world, right? And if you have set up your workspace in a dedicated room, be it a room that usually is the place you sleep or whatever it is about during the daytime, that room is your office. Then when you walk through that door, that is your portal, and the physical awareness of walking through that or walking past that allows you to remind yourself to cognitively transition into the right mode. But if you don't have that, if you don't have the luxury and you kind of like work close or on the kitchen table, then use an edge of the kitchen table or an imaginary line of an extension of the table that basically says, this line, when I cross through it, that is my portal. I'm entering my workspace. Very, very powerful, because it also allows you and gives you permission to now just be yourself, be in work mode. And so that leads me to the first thing you should do when you get into work mode in the morning, and that is run a routine, a morning routine. And the morning routine can have a checklist nature to it. I think we produced a checklist, and it might be by now already on the in the survival guide. If not, I'm sure we can put it in there as an example. this is the checklist we use at MindMaven, but you can use anyone. You know, whatever you works. I review my calendar, see how much time I have for individual contributing time, for makers time. I have a dedicated approach to my to-do list in a checklist, in a task management solution. I clean it up and I set my priorities in that day in terms of what do I need to work on proactively today that move the needles most, and only then allow myself to go and check my email. Why? Because email is a reactive hell that we get sucked into. So basically stay away from email until you've done your morning routine. And so one of the best pieces of content you will find on the survival guide is from Andreas Klinger here. He is with AngelList, and by the way, as you can see here, the most handsome contributor of Almanac. And he talks about how do you transition into a remote work piece. It's probably more of a like starting from nowhere and becoming that more as a company thing, but it talks about transition in not that different of a way than what I just mentioned. Good. And so we talked about transition, and the last advice I gave you around personal about the morning routine is already the beginning of like making sure you structure your day. The morning routine is really important in figuring out how I'm going to try to make this day work. So I got a few tips around how to structure your day. And I'm going to start off with the best productivity principle that you'll find anywhere. It is stuff that you will learn that a Stephen Covey has in common, a Stephen Frankly productivity system has in common with getting things done. And they all have this one simple notion in common. And it says that basically, as long as you know what to work on next, and that next thing is going to be the most important, most needle moving thing you can work on, you will become a more productive version of yourself, if not the most productive version of yourself. So if you take anything away from everything that I'm saying about is memorize this. If I know what I'm working on next, and that next thing is indeed the best next thing I could work on, you are going to become a lot more productive and a lot more results oriented in terms of your work. And that's very helpful for working from home. We at MindMaven teach a very specific system around using the tool Asana. And you can see that this is basically what ends up how my to-do list looks like after I did my morning routine. There's a on deck and an up next. And as long as what's on deck, that's the thing I need to work on next, right? Is the most important thing to work on, I will be probably very successful in staying productive. The other thing that is really subtle, but a lot of people don't spend enough time understanding it, and you can squeeze out a lot of productivity that way, is understanding your energy cycles. Some people are late starters, others are early birds, most of them are. And so what happens is that right an hour after waking up, you enter a 2 hour to 2.5 hour period of most productivity. Don't waste it on meetings. Use it for the creative work that you are being tasked to operate on. Then after that period, we enter the lunchtime, we eat, all of our blood from our brain has to go to the stomach to digest what we've eaten, and we're getting into a slug. Great time for meetings, right? Because your brain is still capable of handling meetings. And then basically you have a second win in the afternoon, and some people have that even later. Another really awesome pragmatic tip is the Pomodoro Technique. Can I see a show of hands again on how many of you guys have heard of this before? It's a very simple concept. It's so simple that it shouldn't even have its own name, but it does. Set up a timer for 25 minutes, figure out some type of work that you think you can do within 25 minutes, make it a slight stretch goal, and then basically, work on it and try to get it done within these 25 minutes. Then you take a 5-minute break, in which you can do things like move a little bit more, and we'll talk about that in a second. And that's what this is. That's what the Pomodoro Technique proposes. But look, find your own rhythm. If it's 90 minutes and 15 minutes of a break, or 50-minute work and 10 minutes, that all works. But structure your day in that way, so you start thinking that way in terms of what do I need to get done and how much time do I have available for it. Good. The third tip that I have for you around working from home and being really successful is actually do prioritize movement. You are moving by definition a lot less when you are working from home because you don't have to commute. You don't have to walk from one office place to the other. And so it is super, super important. And there are three things that you can do working from home. And the key thing that I want to say is, like, there's certain things you can do that you can't do in the office. So let's take advantage of that. One is micro stretching. The second thing is walk around the block. Use positive alacrity if you can. Keep your distance, of course. And of course, work out remotely. And working out remotely is so much easier than you can think. There is YouTube videos for body weight exercises, really well done, yoga, really well done sessions. You can get together with your friends and do that together. And in fact, I'm a living example of how possible it is, because I was fortunate enough to have a personal trainer for almost 2 years. That trainer trained me while living in Spain. I was still in the US on the West Coast, and he was in Spain. And literally, I was probably the fittest I've ever been post being a dad. Good. So the last thing that I wanted to bring up is really understand that you need to create some boundaries. When you are working from home, a lot of people will default you to the home me mode. And so they will behave towards you as home me, even though you are actually trying to be in work me. And what that will result in is interruptions. And interruptions are expensive. And you can see that with all of the green shaded stuff here. It takes a little while for us to get concentrated to do the best work we can do. And that time is sort of lost until we reach a peak experience, and then a disruption will bring us down to zero within instance. And then there's the duration of the interruption. And so limiting the interruptions, some of the best things you can do is just simply teach people when you're in what mood, when you're in work me mode, and then how they should behave. Create physical separation if you can. If you can't, create physical signs. For example, this could be a great way of indicating right now I'm work me and do not disturb me unless the house is burning down, and things like this. It's just important to communicate that to everyone around, including children. Good. And so the last few words that I have for you guys, if you guys have questions, now is a great time to answer to throw them in so that we can jump in. Melinda is probably already ready and has a bunch of them for us to worry about. The point that I want to say is, like, look, we're going through trying times, and it's going to get still worse most likely before it gets better. The things that I do that help me is that I daily remind myself is that this shall pass. I remind myself of the fact that there are things I have control over and there are things I don't have control over, and I focus on those that I do. And one of the things all of you have control over right now is how you create the experience of working from home. And the third thing that I do, and I really like this, that I daily remind myself that there are so many benefits of working from home, from having the world's shortest commute, to being able to have the things I like around me, to doing things I can do during the work time that I can only do at home, and so on and so forth. And that's really where I want to leave you guys off, and we're gonna open up for some questions. And while we're doing the questions, I think Connor is here to ask you guys one more poll question, and is going to open up the poll. I know that it never ended up working out, so I hope that this time around it will work. So we're going to open up the poll and start asking questions. Melinda, what do you got?
Yeah, so we've got a couple of questions. The first one is about managing guilt.
Managing guilt. Okay, whoever asked that question, can you throw in what kind of guilt you had?
Yeah, we'll wait for that to come back. And in the meantime, we have how do you encourage helping people at home and at work who don't see the benefits of these ideas and the structure?
So these people are not with you at home, so it's not family members. It's just how do you help other people do that? Look, social pressure is one of the most powerful ways of changing things. So find people that are your allies and help them first, because they want to do it. And the more people around these people that are resistant do it, the more likely it is that they will eventually start adapting it. And when they see other people being successful in that and struggling less, it is an extremely powerful motivator. And then you know, that's sort of where I would focus on is if you really have a change management challenge there with people not really believing in it, you know, find your allies and start building a movement. And eventually the cognitive dissonance theory about how our brain works, where we do not like not believing in the way we behave, we eventually start believing in how we behave because we don't like that dissonance in our brain. So ultimately, if you get enough people to do it, they'll succeed.
Yeah, we've also had some people on Almanac talk about that, and getting leadership behind it as the first kind of stakeholder to buy in has been helpful for people. Okay, our next question, the guilt about not being productive enough. There's a lot of shocking things going on in the world, and it's hard to feel like you're staying focused amidst all of that.
So basically my comment said, this whole presentation, I hope you already walked away with a few good ideas, because this is about avoiding the guilt. The guilt is the thing that will cause you to eventually work longer hours. And that obviously creates you to feel unhappy about working from home and wish you could go back to your physical world, even though it could be just as good as an experience. But particularly on the guilt thing, is the best thing that I have for you is label those thoughts. You know, learn to become aware when those thoughts come up and saying, guilt. That's a guilt thought, right? There are different flavors of them, but they all are basically rooted in the emotion they unleash, and that emotion is guilt. And if you can label it by saying guilt, it brings the awareness to your cognitive abilities, meaning you can now realize this is guilt, and then you can choose to let that thought go, and saying, by having antidote thoughts, such as you know what, this is something I don't want to feel guilty about, right? And then let it go, and saying, guilt is not helpful in this moment. I'm going to, I respect this feeling, but I'm going to let it go. And then basically look at what you need to do, what caused that trigger, what triggered that, becoming aware of those triggers that triggered that thought, and then trying to eliminate that trigger, whatever it might be, right? Spending a little less time on those news sources that then basically sucked you in for 15 minutes instead of the 3 you thought you would do it. For example, then you say, okay, I still want to get to those news sites, for whatever reason. So set a 3-minute timer, and then, you know, stop when the timer is over and say, okay, I'm going to go back to work. There are many ways in which you can eliminate triggers. All right. Do we have, we still have 3 more minutes. Any more questions, Melinda?
Yeah, there's more questions about how to stay productive when you do have kids at home.
Yes. So Melinda, I'm almost thinking this is a whole session on itself that I'd love to basically do. In fact, we already got a bunch of really good advice and things collected. It's just a bullet point list. I have to take a look at it and see if I feel comfortable sharing it. Obviously, what we have already with the Nicole's thing, definitely go through that. But my quick thing is this. The biggest thing you could do yourself, I have 3 things I'm going to throw out at you. Number 1 is, do not allow more pressure to be increased, but trying to make both work. If you are, let's get to the perfect storm scenario. You're 2 parents, both are working, because you know, if you live in California, it's almost like a given. And you have kids at home that basically need to be schooled in some way or other, right? You cannot do all 3 things, all of those things together. So the biggest advice is, do not let, you know, like, be okay with, you're going to be less productive for work because you have to tend to the kids. And I think socially, this is going to become an accepted thing. And I hope you work for a company where leadership is encouraging that understanding that your productivity will have to go down because of that scenario. But don't have pressure, because that will cause you to react in snappy ways to your kids that don't help. Second thing is, be super aware that your kids look at you in trying times. So everything you do, they will learn from. If you react emotionally, they will learn from it. If you are, pissed off, they will learn from you. So be aware of who you are around your kids, and give yourself enough breathing time around that to be the version that they should be learning from. That's what I said earlier, is like, get away from if you're feeling anxiety or angst or pissed offness because of some other triggers, find your ways to work through it before you re-engage with your family. Let your partner know that you need it, and then the partner can step in. And then the third thing, pragmatically speaking, is like, look, kids working from home are now a given. If they pop into your room or into the background of your video call, don't feel embarrassed about it. Welcome them in. A simple rule should be, if a kid shows up, the kid gets introduced. It's actually another way of connecting, because like if I work in an office, I very rarely, maybe once a year, bring a kid there. And that way we get to see, it's a benefit that you get from working from home. You get to see more family, more about the person's life and their family than you did before, just because we're working from home right now. Hope that answered the question. Whoever asked that question, could you give me a yes or no? Did I get in the right direction? And would you love more of this? Let us know. Okay, I think we're getting to the end of this. Melinda, what I think we wanted to say is, like, if you, I don't know if we got the answer of the poll. We should probably close the poll and see what we've gotten. I'm very curious to see if we did a good job and if you guys would recommend it to others. If you do, please do. We are going to paste a link and send you a link for next week's webinar. So if you have friends that you think should hear this because it's going to help them, please link that forward. Also, my email address is patrick@mindmaven.com. I'm going to reach out to many of you, if not all of you. I'm going to ask you guys for feedback. What could have we done better? Did you like that, Almanac jumped on this and says we should get our content out in different formats? Should they do that more regularly? I'm just super curious to hear about this. We really want to learn and help. Melinda, is there anything else you want to share before we sign off?
Just that if anyone has any more insights to share with the community, I'll be in touch and would love to get it into our remote work playbooks. And just a huge thank you, Patrick. This has been amazing. And we're getting an outpouring of thank yous in the chat. So this is great.
That's awesome to see. Well, good. Then I think we're going to sign off for everyone. I'm hoping to come up with more content in this way for our community. And so keep an eye out for invitations that talk about how to get deeper into conversations, how to not do small talk, but have more meaningful conversations. We might even do something around how to manage people working remotely, right, Melinda? You already have another really awesome guide for that. And the family question keeps on coming up, so maybe that's something we could address. So expect more from us, and for now we sign off, and goodbye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Yes. All right. Good. That's it.